the South East London Folklore Society. We're in for a treat tonight. We've got Jack who's going to speak about Goddess Holda, which will be excellent. So this talk's going to go on for around about an hour or so, then we're going to have a break for refreshments, and then we'll come back with a few announcements of upcoming bits and bobs, and then questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Jack.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And while I'm doing the thank yous, thanks for coming. It's nice to have you here. And thanks to Nigel for inviting me. I think this is the second time I've been in this room in the last few years, isn't it? It was one of the Dark Muse talks, wasn't it?
Yes,
Magic on the Stage. And Allied Weirdness. Tonight is actually going to be chock full of weirdness. Holda loves, as Goddess Holda absolutely adores, physical phenomena, sometimes of the most extreme variety. Now I have to ask myself a question. Are we a broad-minded audience tonight?
Yes.
Yes, of course we're a broad-minded audience. Of course we are. We need to be, as you may find out a bit later on. She does like these very extreme physical phenomena, all sorts of strange things happening when you're working with her, and you become very used to that idea, if you like, a sort of conceptual model of working in magical reality rather than mundane or consensus reality, because when you're working with Holda, you're going very much into magical reality, and you can take a phenomenon and you can say, oh well, that's not supposed to happen, how can that happen? But in magical reality, of course, anything can happen, which is rather nice, and it's rather reassuring in a way. Sky's the bloody limit, you know, or down there's the limit, whatever you like. So what I thought we'd do tonight is, first of all, start off with some fairly hardcore sort of academic background material about the Goddess Holda, who, over I suppose the last 20 years or so, has been raising her profile, I'm delighted to say, and she has two sacred sites in Greenwich, one that a lot of people still don't know about, which is the Queen Inigo Jones Queen's House, of which we've got a lovely beautiful photograph which I will pass around, because as well as being designed by a very interesting man, Inigo Jones, with quite a powerful magical background all of his own in the 17th century, and inhabited for a while by Henrietta Maria, the wife of Charles I. I mean, there's a lot of magic in there. I'm sure a few people in this room, probably quite a lot of people in this room have been in there. If they have, they'll certainly know what I'm talking about. There's that, which is the site of what was the original Holda cult centre, if you like, centre of worship in what's now called Greenwich. But up on the hilltop, we've got the Snow Well. Now, the Snow Well Hollow, the well itself, was filled in the 19th century. There's a photograph here, a rather nice photograph, taken on summer solstice a few years ago by a mate of mine called Brian Reason, who some people here will know. He also took that one. And that's the site of the filled-in well, which in absolute accordance with Holda folklore, as we'll find out, and the works of Jacob Grimm, the very, very wonderful Jacob Grimm. It's an underworld gateway, basically. They access Holda's realm. Sorry?
Is that summer solstice or winter solstice?
Did I say summer? I meant winter.
Yeah,
I'm very glad you picked me up. Thank you. Well done, that woman. Yeah, the winter solstice. It looks wintry, doesn't it?
It does look wintry, yeah.
Watery, weak winter sun there shining through, isn't it? Would you like to pass those around for me? Perhaps whoever's sees them last and give them back to Nigel or whatever. Or something like that. So, Jacob Grimm, let's sort of kick the ball off by having a couple of sayings to get us into the Holda vibe. And the wonderful one that Jacob Grimm did record in his great book Teutonic Mythology, big 2-volume work published in the 1830s initially. There's fog on the mountain. Frau Holda has lit her fire inside it. I love that. It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, and it brings images into the mind, doesn't it, of a mist-shrouded mountain and what's going on deep under the earth, you know, down in the cavern. The fog. And there's another nice one, and this one is found very much in Holland as well. And Freya Aswin goes so far as to suggest that Holland is actually named after the goddess Holda. It's snowing. Frau Holda is shaking her pillows. I'm sure many people here have heard that one before. Great, isn't it? And a German pen friend I had a while back, before I fell out with her, Many pagans do that. They always fall out with each other sooner or later. It's a pagan thing. I did fall out with her, but she gave me a lot of help, actually, with some of this material. And she told me a wonderful story about her grandma. Now, this is bringing things right forward, you know, into the 20th century. And Grandma on Christmas Eve always used to make a point of going out into the garden at dusk and taking down the clothesline. So she said to her one Christmas Eve, "Grandma, why are you taking down the clothesline? Why are you doing this?" She said, "Well, Frau Holda is going to hurtle through the garden with her furious host. Supposing she gets tangled up on the clothesline." Now that was, you know, that was 1950s, 1960s, that was being said. It's great, isn't it? The way these things have hung on. And these kind of traditions, they go underground, but they don't disappear. They're still hanging around. And I must admit, I think that's lovely. Now, Holda basically is a German goddess. She's not Norse, but she does have a Norse opposite number. Andrew knows what I'm going to say, don't you? Yeah, the goddess Gale, who in Norse mythology has got a vertical line down the middle, and there's sort of rotting, disintegrating flesh on one side, and this beautiful young woman on the other side. It's half and half. Holda's very, very similar to that. Freya Aswin again goes as far as to suggest that the Gale rune, which is very much Holda's sacred insignia, tattooed on my left arm. I'm not going to show you because I've shown everybody that so much they must be fed up with seeing it by now. But there it is, the Gale rune. Freya thinks that also applies to the goddess Gale, because there are some very, very strong similarities, in fact. And her stomping ground, Holda's main stomping ground, I do say main, is Thüringen, spelt Thuringia, but pronounced Thüringen, in central Germany. And Holda, where does it come from? The kind or gracious one. It's a rather nice name to have. Grimm was of the opinion it was an old High German female name. And this giving of gifts is a very important part of Holda. Göttingen, for example, and Grimm found this one and committed it to paper. Thank the goddess he did. People like him and Cecil Sharp here in sunny England and stuff like that. We owe those people such a lot. And they used to go to the old people. They always said, go to the old people and they will give you the stories. And there's wonderful tales about children putting clogs out on Christmas Eve, you know, and Holda coming along and putting presents in them. However, in some parts of Germany, she was a bit less beneficent because they had to be good children. Now, there were children who had been naughty and pissing their parents off and everybody else and running around shops and being a pain in the arse, things like that. She used to tear their insides out and stuff them with straw when she turned up. Not very... bit traumatic, isn't it, to have your insides ripped out and stuffed with straw? I don't think I'd like that. I think I would have been a good kid if I'd lived in that area. I've done that just to be on the safe side, I think. So, and bringing them eggs and presents and this kind of thing. Now, the earliest recorded references we've got are Strabo's eulogy of Judith, wife of Louis the Pious. Now, just to give you a background, Judith compared to Holda here, and Louis lived from 788 to 840 CE, son of Charlemagne, who he succeeded in 814 as Holy Roman Emperor, and he was also the first King Louis of France. We're going into some really sort of obscure people here. That was the first recorded reference to Holda, the first time the name was actually written down, and you found out something about it from written sources. Now, there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful stories about Holda being kind to people and gifts. Just two quickies. There's a chariot coming down the road, and there's the local wheelwrights busy working away, like my great-great-uncle did in Buckinghamshire. He was a wheelwright. And the chariot pulls up, and a lady of some substance gets out. That's what the sort of vibe she gave off. And she said, "Can you fix my wheel?" So the guy says, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that." And he thinks, "I won't discuss money with her. You don't discuss money with a woman of that quality. You wait, you know. And she'll come up with some sort of bargain and you can sort of work it out in a diplomatic kind of a way, as if you're not really interested, you know. But you are, of course." And he got this wheel fixed in about 5 minutes. And she said, "Oh, well, that's nice. Thanks a lot, then." And she was about to drive off. And she looked round and said, "I'll tell you what I'll give you for payment. You shave some wood chips off my wheel. Keep them. Bye." And he looked at me and said, bloody hell, don't think much of that. It's a bit mean, isn't it? Wood chips? Oh well. So he picked them up and shoved them in his pocket, went home, eventually took off his breeches and went to bed. And when he woke up in the morning, picked up the breeches and sitting on the edge of his bed, and he thought, why are they so heavy? Put his hand in and felt something cold and hard in his pocket. They'd all turned to gold. That is so Holda. That is absolutely Holda. And the other one about sort of middle-aged shepherd who's out hunting the chamois, and he's going up into the mountains, and he finds the absolutely universal door in the hill, the entrance to fairyland. What a wonderful door to find! What a great door to find! And of course, he opens it and goes in, and there's my lady sitting in there. This wonderful crystal cave. Come in, I've been waiting for you. I knew you were coming. Come in and sit down. And she teaches him how to use flax. She's a goddess very associated with spinning and with flax. She teaches him how to use it, how to use flax for fun and profit, and to make a lot of money for yourself. He says, well, thank you, my lady, I'll do that. And he's just going to go, wait, I'm quite finished. And there's a little flower in some water. It's been picked, beautiful little flower in some water. And she says, take this. And she says, keep this by your bed. And every morning when you wake up, look at it. And if it's still looking fresh, that's fine. If it's wilting, it means you're going to die quite quickly. It's a cheering thought, boy. She said, you'll just about have time to get back up here and you can come and live with me in bliss. She liked this guy, didn't she? So he goes home and he works away and he's very industrious and he makes himself a lot of money using flax. And then one morning he wakes up and the flower's drooping. And he goes back up to find the door in the hill, which had vanished into thin air, by the way, of course. And there it is back, and he goes in and holds us there with her arms open. Come in, you're here now, you're staying. You'll have fun, you'll be all right. Well, that's another wonderful story. And this comes right up to date, so if you happen to be in bed with your lover at some point, and things are getting, shall we say, rather pleasant and interesting, and you happen to have your eyes shut, doesn't matter what gender you are, if you're all the same gender, if you're not, you're whatever, no relevance to any of this. It is possible, if you're involved with Holda and you're working with her, especially on a regular basis, to suddenly see this blazing Gale room behind closed eyelids about, I would say, 20 minutes before orgasm. If that happens, things are going to get even more interesting. I don't think we really need to say anymore. Now, Holda's got two aspects, and I drew this picture to go actually with the book Goddesses, Guardians and Graves in 1944, and then he said World War II. 1994, I drew that one. It's the graveyard, the pagan Saxon burial ground in Greenwich Park. They're walking across it. And of course it's been snowing, and the old idea of her throwing out these snowflakes, well, she's throwing, what she's throwing out in the old mythology, of course, are feathers, and the folklore, she's throwing out feathers which turn into snowflakes. What she's throwing out here are Gale runes, which of course are made in the image of the snowflake, the sixfold division of the circle. If you could pass that round for me, please. So there's these two aspects. This hag, quite frightening sometimes, the sort of image of the woman who comes around and punishes the naughty children at Christmas, and brings the nice things to the good children, and also this giver of gifts. But this is the woman older than time itself, flying through the skies at a really high altitude with her milk white hair streaming out behind her in the freezing wind. Older than time itself and cackling with laughter as she throws, riding a huge white goose and throwing down the feathers that turn into snowflakes. That's very much this hag aspect. So she's a goddess of death and the underworld, a goddess of winter, a goddess of sexual love, and a protectress of animals. There's a nice little mixture. There's something for everybody there, isn't there, really? I think that's good. And she's the patron goddess, or what other tree could it be but the good old elder tree, the witch tree of Europe, the wonderful, wonderful elder. I love the elder, I think it's great. I had the privilege of working on a rather large garden. I'm the head gardener, but I'm also the only gardener. This is my ex-wife's garden, we're good friends. And I do this garden for her because she's got back problems, and it's fine because I love gardening anyway, and where I live I haven't got a garden. So and there's this massive elder tree there that started off and it stayed that high, that tall for a few years, and all of a sudden it's about 30 feet tall now.
Where is this?
About 30 feet. Elder, yeah. Elder, the witch tree. Traditionally the witch tree of Europe. And in Austria, the elder tree is known as Frau Holler's tree, or Frau Holder's tree. There's this strong identification with her. And most people here will have heard of the Rollright Stones and the associated legend in Oxfordshire. I would say in Warwickshire, really, because they're right on the line, aren't they? And some are in Warwickshire. And in the story, the witch has turned the king's men when she's turned them into stone. She says, "And I myself an elden tree shall become." So she's going to actually turn into an elder tree herself to gain that identification. Now she does have a secondary sacred tree, and that's the apple tree. Now in Renaissance journeys, she was seen as the queen of the witches. She was a big lady, very important lady. And they used to have a saying which Grimm quotes. If you saw a woman in the morning who sort of got up and was walking around in the street looking a bit dishevelled without her hair being brushed, you know, and her clothing a bit untidy, people used to say, "You've been riding with Holda." And it was a sort of Christian insult. It was a sort of insult that these tedious people used to think it was an insult. I mean, we would take it as a compliment, wouldn't we? Yeah, that's right. Well, it probably didn't pay to say, yeah, that's right. You might have nasty things done to you, so they wouldn't have said that. But they probably had been, in fact. I'm sure they had been, in fact. Now, I love these. These are the Night Women of Holda. The Night Women of Holda. Did anyone here, I don't think they did, or Andrew did, I think, come to a PF Open ritual that I did in 2003 in Holder's honour when Inbal stood in for Holder. You were there, weren't you? And I thought we had to have the Night Women of Holder in this ritual. So I read this little bit of Grimm out, and then these women suddenly rose up from behind a curtain and descended on unsuspecting people in the audience and sort of cuddled them and kissed them and things. Nice. I thought, let's materialise them. And he calls them elvish beings riding on beasts in women's shape who did mortal men kindnesses.
Do I recall the reverse country clout?
Of course.
Very
What else could they be?
Yeah.
It brings to mind actually a Mexican folk song called La Bruja, the Witch, which comes from Veracruz, the Sonorosho tradition of Veracruz. And in that one, you've got this very randy witch who has a habit of materialising in the beds of married couples, and in the middle of the night, usually when the wife is fast asleep. What a surprise. And there's one, in the song, there's one feisty wife who suddenly wakes up and finds her husband rather agreeably at it with La Bruja, with the witch, and she's a bit pissed off over this, and she starts chasing the witch, and the witch races around the room with this woman racing after her with this broom which she's belabouring her with. The witch suddenly, there has to be some perks in being a Mexican witch, because she suddenly sprouts wings and shoots off through the window, which I assume was open. Let's just hope it was. It reminded me of that a bit, these women turning up in the middle of the night. I was going to say coming in the middle of the night, but it's a bit too obvious, wasn't it? You know, we can't be too obvious. That witch Holder now, there are a few people who weren't very impressed with Holder at all. Martin Luther, bless his little cotton socks, the miserable old sod, was one of those. And he said, "That's witch Holder with her disgraceful habit of playing the violin at night." So if you hear a violin in the middle of the night, you're going to know that is protective of wild creatures, and the goose is a sacred animal. Swans and dogs, very important. My medium friend and the best questing psychic, I think, on the planet, who I've worked with for years, and she's mentioned in all of my books, my great friend Jo Shrimpton, who's currently writing a book. She's a hereditary witch, and she's currently writing a book called Trust Me, I'm a Witch, which I think is rather a nice title. Psychically received picture. She'd never done a psychically received picture of a goddess before. It was always uncles and aunts and sort of usual run-of-the-mill medium stuff, and it absolutely blew her away, this presence, and with these two lovely dogs that Holder had. And there was a Hagar rune in it, but it hasn't come out. She didn't know what it was. I mean, she just drew this Hagar rune. It just really came out, you know. So other titles, Frau Venus, Grimm says between the 15th and 16th centuries in Thuringen, a lot of people called her Frau Venus, living in the Venusberg, the sacred mountain, very much a sexual deity. Now, Wagner cottoned onto all this, and the wonderful story of Tannhaus are based on various factual sources which had sort of warped into mythology. And Grimm says of Holda in this aspect, in subterranean caves she dwells in state and splendour, like the kings of dwarves. So you've got the dwarves in northern mythology, haven't you? Working deep down in the earth with precious metals. Some few mortal men find their way into the cavern and live with her in bliss. That's what Mr. Grimm wrote. And in 1630 there was a German magus who was arrested and questioned by the Christian authorities about his mysterious connections with Holda. And he said that from the front she was a beautiful woman, and from the back she looked like a blasted tree. So there again you've got that similarity to the goddess Gale, haven't you? The sort of half and half. The Hagar rune is her sacred sigil, and before we get into it, for anybody who hasn't seen it, there it is. I've had that for quite a few years now, and it tends to be covered up most of the time, so let's take that nice bright red. And I want to do something, and I don't usually do this, but you're going to hear some really weird stories tonight. So what I'm going to do is swear an oath upon that rune, which is the Hagar rune, and the oath I'm going to swear, I swear in the name of the Hagar rune and of Valhalla, my beloved goddess, all the stories that I will tell you tonight are true. Because some of them do quite beg a belief, as you will find out in a minute. Some of them are totally and utterly bizarre. But magical reality, let's accept it and let's have fun with it, let's enjoy it, you know. So, yes, in association with spinning. Now, children, this is very important. Medieval and Renaissance Germany, especially in central Germany, Christianity and paganism existed side by side. A lot of overlap, especially calendric overlap. You've got 40 days and 40 nights and all this kind of thing, mixing up with very pagan stuff. You get that in Scotland. I mean, you've got Thomas the Rhymer. For 40 days and 40 nights they rode through red blood through a Lee, and they saw neither sun nor moon, but heard the roaring of the sea. What a wonderful, wonderful song that is. What a ballad, Thomas the Rhymer, isn't it? The whole sort of sex with fairies things, it's all there, isn't it? Intercourse with that wonderful fairy realm. I think it's marvellous stuff. I love it. And now, in Thuringen, Holda was seen as the foster mother of stillborn children, and also, this is the interesting bit, of babies who died unbaptized. So you've got a strong Christian element there, but you've also got, you've got the church, the miserable old church, sort of consigning them to purgatory or some shit like that. And Holda said, well, don't worry about that, come with me when I come, come along with me. And she's skipping through the woods and all these children, running along behind her. Now this, of course, comes through into magical reality in the 20th century. Now, there's a druid friend of mine, an elderly druid called Septimus Braun. I don't know if anyone in this room knows Septimus, or is it? Yeah, you know Septimus, don't you? I don't think he's still with us, is he? No, I didn't think he was. The late Septimus Braun. I sort of lost touch with him rather. Now, he was sitting in Greenwich Park, down by the Queen's House, which, as I said, was the cult centre of Holda worship, and there was also a major heathen Saxon graveyard down there as well, on top of that, on the flat ground. People think of it as being up the hill, which it was, but there was also one at the bottom in front of the Queen's House. And he was sitting there one afternoon, and it was 1966, it was a bloody long time ago, and all of a sudden he was aware of this raven-haired woman walking towards him, carrying a baby, and carrying this baby at rather a strange angle. He didn't know why, but it just seemed a strange angle, and he had this inner conviction that this woman was looking after this baby, but it wasn't actually hers, but it was baby that was looking after. So there we are. That's all, this whole sort of foster mother thing. And another one, a bit more spectacular in a way, there was a pagan lass who used to come years ago when we had Souls at Charlton House, which some of us of course remember, and good days, weren't they? It's good, Charlton House. Not as good as here though. And this girl told me this wonderful tale once, told me one-to-one. She was a bit embarrassed about it, and she was sitting on the edge of that same expanse of flat grass that was dug up for use actually as allotments during World War II in front of the Queen's house, and it was getting dark. It was a summer night, summer evening, and it was getting dark. It was quite late, and the park was about to shut. She was sitting there, and it was pretty quiet, and all of a sudden she heard all these children singing and dancing and shouting out, and it was like being in the middle of a playground, and it was getting louder and louder and louder. Of course, the goosebumps are coming up, and the hair's standing up, isn't it? Children everywhere, and it went on for about 2 minutes, and then it gradually faded. And same place, same phenomenon. So, fitting in very much with this folkloric material about Holda. So, how did I get involved with her? Well, I was born in Greenwich in 1943, I suppose about a 15-20 minute walk away from the Snowwell Hollow, and the same sort of distance away from the Queen's house. And I was also always pulled to both of those sites from a very early age. I mean, I can remember loving being taken up to the Snowwell Hollow when I was still in a pram. I mean, I can actually remember that. My mum did something rather quaint. There's a lot of hawthorn trees just to the south of it, where the graves, the burial mounds patrimony begin. And there's a lot of hawthorn trees there, and these hawthorn trees were covered in lovely red berries, and she picked all these lovely red berries and plonked them down on my pram blanket. And she looked away, and I thought, ooh, nice berries. And I ate them all. And I can still remember this, and I mean, I must have been incredibly young. She looked and said, "Oh my God, he's eaten them." I don't know what she thought I'd do with them. But bloody hell, you know, something as gorgeous. I like these, you know. Went down very quickly. Maybe it made me what I am today. Who knows? We don't know, do we? Maybe. So yeah, I lived in Greenwich until the 70s, and I've moved on up the way, and I've lived all over South London, South West London and South East London. But romantic places like Tulsa and West Norwood, you know, and moved around a bit. And that just happened by circumstance as much as anything is. I think all these things happen for reasons. Living back in Greenwich again now. And in 1970, I got the feeling Greenwich had got this other identity, this hidden self, and it had this massively strong pagan element to it, and these different pagan cultures that had settled here and left this psychic imprint, this imprint on the psychic atmosphere, which mediums like my friend Joe and other Vivian Hughes, of course, who you know, and lots of people you know, can pick up. And I spent a long time researching all this stuff, and then doing guided walks, and writing booklets and articles, doing talks, and doing a few books. This, of course, this new one being one of them, which is here somewhere. I don't know, we'll find it in a minute anyway. Oh, it's in here. There we are. We do have some copies, ladies and gentlemen, over there at a slightly reduced price. Do avail yourself if you get interested. Great stuff. This is a sort of Holda Worker's Handbook. It's a sort of way of a lot of practical stuff that you can do in here. It's a doing book as well as a book about experiences, but a lot of experiential stuff in the book. And on one occasion, I took a couple of psychics up around Greenwich on one of my Greenwich walks. Now, these two people used to work with Andrew Collins, or I'm sure some of you will be familiar with, who invented the term psychic questing, where you put psychically received material together with the fruits of reference research. And reference research is terribly important because it's grounding, you know, it saves you from floating away. You put the two together and you investigate a given mystery. It's a desperately exciting way of working. It's also an exhausting way of working because you're never off duty. Material comes through day, night, in your sleep. People ring up the phone, you know, they phone you up and say, "I've just seen this, I've just been told this, and I'm supposed to tell you this." And I built up this network of psychics, and I brought these two people along, and they were very experienced at questing. As I say, they're Alex Langstone and Carol Young. They were both associated with Andy Collins at different times. And let's remember those words of Grim: "Mortals to reach her must go through the well." And we got as far as the Snow Well, and Carol said to me, "We need to go very quiet." She said, "There's somebody here for you." And she said, "I've got this German goddess of winter. She lives here in the park, and she wants to get to know you, Jack." Now that's the sort of remark that changes lives, or it can change lives. It certainly changed mine. I mean, it undoubtedly changed mine. And this hollow We stood in this mysterious hollow, this underworld gateway, and she said, I think if you do some research, you'll find there was a well here at one time. The well's been filled in, but there's still that well energy and that mode of transporting yourself down into that other reality below the ground, and there's all kinds of things going on. And it's the underworld gateway, and you get to know this lady, you'll be able to use it and this kind of thing. Now, the actual well itself was called the Snow Well, and that area is rich in winter names. There's a hill called Snow Hill just beyond it that goes down towards Greenwich. Changed its name in the 19th century to Plum Pudding Hill. So again, you've still got the winter connection. It's very strong. There's a house nearby called the White House. And most interesting of all, we'll come back to this if we have time near the end, there's a long, gentle walkway up the hill. Now that was at one point in time called Snow Hill Walk. It now goes by the singularly boring name of the avenue. But most interesting of all, in 1746, according to Roke's map, which is the first reliable map of the Greenwich area, it was called Brazen-Faced Walk. What a wonderful name. And if I tell you there was a famous red light district at the bottom of the hill, it might give you some clue. There's a sex and death at the bottom of the hill. There's actually 20,385 people buried on one side of the road, and the location of the one-time red light district on the other. If that's not Holda, sex and death, I don't know what is, you know. It's all there. I did a talk about that myself a few years ago called The Trackway of Carnal Delight. And if you buy this, there's an appendix at the end, and it's called Holda and the Sacred Landscape, subtitled The Trackway of Carnal Delight. And it's all about King William Walk in Greenwich, very close to where we used to have selves in the Spanish galleon. You could walk to King William Walk in approximately 30 seconds. And that pub, it was very, very near indeed. It's a shame we lost it. It was a nice pub. Well, these things happen, don't they? It can't be helped. And so Snow Hill and the Snow Well. Now, the earliest recorded reference I've been able to track down is dated 1637. And it's in the Queen's House papers, which were published by the old Ministry of Works in the 1930s, just before the war. And they published this bill, it's on one piece of paper, and it says, bill, doesn't even say how much, it says, bill for the repair of the Snow Well out in the park. And it's dated 1637. So it's called, in Charles I's time, before the Civil War, it was called the Snow Well then. And leading away from it to the south, you've got a wonderful trackway which leads through the tumuli where people were buried between the 6th and 8th centuries CE. People of a Germanic nature, going by the stuff that's been dug up there. It was dug up in 1784. Quite a caring kind of an excavation took place in 1784. Now I was led by the underworld to see if I could go back to this hollow on my own and see if I could douse the site of the Snow Well. So I got my little boxwood pendulum that I bought from the Ethereus Society, terribly heavy, goes around like an aircraft propeller. It's quite dangerous. So some people have seen it whizzing, you've seen it whizzing around, haven't you? It's quite dangerous, you have to be a bit careful. And I soon pinpointed where it seemed to me, where my pendulum told me the Snow Well had been. And then something very weird happened. About 2 weeks later, the ground started subsiding in that spot. It went down about that deep. And there's this wonderful little bowl, and that over the years, I mean, the paving grapevine is great. Word spreads on the paving grapevine, doesn't it? It spreads very well, actually. It's a wonderful means of getting things around. And it was doing it long before things like Facebook and all that stuff. It was doing it simple word of mouth. People getting on the phone. So a lot of people now know what was there. And you'll very often when you go up there to the Snow Well, you'll find things left. You'll find bunches of flowers, bunches of roses. You'll find coins. I found a coconut once, and I thought, well, I know who left it, but I'm not at liberty to say it, actually. And I thought, what a lovely thing, a coconut, you know, what a great idea, why not, you know. And very often things that the wild inhabitants can eat as well, which I think is a lovely thing to do. It's a very, very nice thing to do. Now, this is where we come to strange phenomena. Sounds very Faultian, doesn't it? She does love these physical phenomena, and boy, is it a place for them, Snow Well. Let's not go there getting pissed off and trying to sue Jack under the Trade Descriptions Act if you go there and nothing happens. I mean, it depends a lot on existing circumstances, all kinds of things, phase of the mood drawing, all sorts of things. But I remember going there on a sunny morning with a guy called Tony Lee, a sunny morning in 1994, doing one of my Greenwich walks, the one and only Tony Lee. And I don't know if he had a guy with him. I don't know if anyone here. I know one person knows Tony Lee. And a mate called Cliff. And Cliff had a camera. And Cliff was obsessed with his camera. He had to photograph everything, whether it moved or stood still or whatever. And he said to me, I'm going to put my camera, he said, look, that dip in the ground there, it's just no what. He said, I'm going to put my camera right on top of that, and I'm going to take a photo. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. So I said, yeah, okay, go on then, mate. So he got this camera set up, and he sort of working it out. And all of a sudden, he was hurled backwards with this massive force. Somebody had gone like that. And he was thrown through the air and crashed down on his back in the long grass. And he said something really elevating, like fucking hell, you know. He said, what's going on here? What the hell's happening? This is the place you'd want me to. I said, welcome to our world. It's never boring. Which of course it's not. Then we jumped forward to 1999. Now I've got to be a bit careful with this one because it's not very politically correct. I think I'll use the original words that were said, because we're quite open-minded here, aren't we? Yes, we're nodding, we're open-minded. The girl herself said these. She was a priestess friend of mine. It'd been around. She was well versed in magic. And I went up there to the Snowwell. It wasn't a girlfriend, but a good friend. And I went up there to Snowwell on lovely wet autumn afternoon. And one of those glorious afternoons in October, late October, you know, it's a glow. And wonderful, aren't they? And it's all soaking wet. She said, I've got an urge. And my urge is to sit down and put my whole rear end in the well itself and see what happens, because the well wants me to do it. So I said, fine, okay. You're going to get a wet bum, bring it down to mum and dad. Don't care, I've got to do it, I'll get a wet bum. Well, she's going to get actually soaked. Anyway, she sat down and went into this, well, a sort of transic state, really, I suppose you could say. And she sat there with her eyes shut, about 5 minutes. And then she opened her eyes and looked at me and said, I can't do this anymore. Quite sort of urgent tone. And I said, why? And she said, if I don't get my cunt out of this fucking well, I'm going to explode. But it was graphic, isn't it? But it says it all, and that's what it was about. It's very, very strong. And then jump forward to 2000. Me and my ex-girlfriend went to the Snowwell one Sunday afternoon in September, and we thought we'd stand in the depression, the well depression, and embrace and see what happens. So we stood there and we embraced, quite a tight embrace. And I felt this absolutely massive surge of energy to shoot up, right through my body and out through my crown chakra, if you want to use that paradigm, and up into the sky. And bloody hell, you know, that was something, wasn't it? The earth moved, didn't it? And then we went for a walk, and we'd been walking for about 10 minutes, and I fell over for no apparent reason. So I got up, I didn't get hurt, carried on walking, about another 10 minutes later I fell over again. No obvious reason. Carried on walking, it happened again. And this was this dislocatory effect. I mean, the energy was so powerful that it was doing this to me. Similar thing happened at my local pagan shop, Wickham Moon. I went in there and we were going to talk about a ritual that they... Does anybody here know Wickham Moon? The shop at Eltham? Oh, good. Wickham Moon at Eltham, Shirley and Kim and the gang. They're a nice lot, they're all right. They asked me to do this Holda ritual for them at Yule about 3 years ago, and we had a real perk when I did it because it started snowing in the middle of it. And at the end we looked out and there's this wonderful layer of snow on the ground, you know, which is brilliant really. And I went in there about a week before to talk about this ritual, and I sat down in Shirley's back room, and she does her tarot readings, you know if you've been in the shop. And we were talking about it, and my head started going round and round, and I thought, what the hell's going on? I said, I'm really sorry, Shirley, but I'm finding it very difficult to concentrate on this because my head's going round. And she said, well, I'm glad it's not just me then. The same thing was happening to her, and she said, it's her. It's the energy. She's so excited because we're going to do the ritual. There's these waves of energy, and she went into the temple and did lots of foot stamping and grounding herself. You know, I did the same thing, and she was okay after that. So it is very, very, very feelable. This energy, you know, it's very much there. And one or two more stories about that in a minute. So that's Cliff and his camera, and me falling over. And she takes you, what Holda does, I mean, she takes you right out of consensus reality, and there you are in magical reality. It's not a bad place to be, it's alright. Now, a guy called John Stone did an article for the Greenwich and Lewisham Antiquarian Society, sounding very grounded now for a minute, 1913, And he described the well, and he said it was a large bell-shaped chamber 25 feet deep. At the same time, the park superintendent Webster described it as a 26-foot deep shaft. Well, what's a foot between friends, you know? Lower brick courses Tudor, more modern courses of brick as you came higher up, but there were certainly some Tudor bricks down there. And 4 feet above the actual absolute bottom of the well, there was a feeder tunnel, and the feeder tunnel led out under Snow Hill. So I mean, it was a physical reality. And as far as we know, at some point in the relatively near future, there's going to be an archaeological excavation. Not in any Holda connection, but simply because they see it as a Tudor well, which is fine, I mean it is. A local group called Community, in fact Phil alerted me to this, didn't you? Community Archaeology are doing it, some experts with amateurs working for them. That's fine, I can go with it. I've met them, they're nice people, they're very respectful. I'm sure that the well can handle it. In fact, we might find out some interesting sort of bread and butter stuff about the well. I think it's rather a nice idea. I don't actually know when it's going to happen. So we've got this underworld gateway, and this announcement that Holda wanted to get to know me, and I got to know her. We worked at this together, this relationship. And at that time, my private life was in a massively turbulent state, and I think you get this with dark goddesses. I think people often find when you're really relating to a dark goddess, and there's a really worthwhile kind of dialogue and relationship going on, the mundane world can very often turn absolutely upside down, and mine did. But I stuck with it, and it was. I mean, you've got a choice, but I chose to stuck with it, and we got this relationship established. Now, just to put in a bit about the other burial ground at the bottom of the hill where the children were heard, some interesting artefacts have been dug up there. Apart from human bones, proving it was a graveyard, a wonderful little piece of bronze jewellery was unearthed. And it used to be on show in the old Greenwich Borough Museum when it was over Plumstead Library, and it's now moved. And it's called Greenwich Heritage Centre, and it's in a purpose-built structure in the old Arsenal complex. It's got a terrible vibe. Everyone looks pissed off in there, and nobody knows where anything is. That happens, doesn't it? It's a shame, actually. Anyway, this thing's not on view anymore, but it used to be. And underneath it was a worn old label, very deadpan label, typed with an old imperial typewriter. That'll tell you how old it was. And it said, "Depiction of an erotic act." The erotic act, ladies. I don't think you want to go anywhere near this erotic act. I don't think you want to have anything to do with it, and I'll tell you why. It's very much Holda. There's this goddess standing there, this very tall figure, standing very upright. She's got this massive ornate headpiece. She's obviously pretty damn important. Now, standing in front of her, very close to her, is a rather diminutive gentleman. He's diminutive but for one thing. Now, it's so fucking big. Well, it's like a Lee Enfield rifle from World War I. You know, it's absolutely massive. And he's holding it at an interesting angle. I think it's a 45-degree angle, and it's so big he has to hold on to it, sort of drag on the ground. So it's like this. And it's an unusual position, I can tell you, because it goes up over her shoulder. So it's like Wilhelm Reich's Cloudbuster. There's a bit of Wilhelm Reich stuff there, the Cloudbuster. I loved that. I thought it was absolutely wonderful, and it's a fitting tribute to the whole Holda thing. And the Holda thing's fun. You can have fun with all this stuff. It's not always serious, which is nice. So I bought this little statuette of Holda, and I was doing lots of solo rituals, and I was doing stuff like that, and I had an initiation. I had what you might call an individual, very personal and very intimate initiation from Holda in the back room of the house I used to live in November 1993. It was basically Holda saying, "Boy, it's time, come here," And that was it, wham bang. And I was in a state of very pleasant delirium for about 2 days. I had a job to sort of have normal conversations with people. I was so out of it. And I was playing Fairport Convention records to try and ground myself, listening to Hen's March, Lark in the Morning and all that sort of stuff, trying to get myself a bit grounded. It was wham bang. And then I had a formal initiation honoured to say, from the Fellowship of Isis in 1998 at Ewell, in Atlantis Bookshop in the old Caroline days. Very. I won't say anything about it. It's private. It's an initiation, but it was absolutely unforgettable. So they were both, and I think the personal initiation with Holda was her saying, you know, this is to show you what you are, what you've become, and what you're going to be. And the initiation by the FOI, in a way, it was really, I think, a kind of recognition of that fact, and it was a recognition of the fact that I'd sort of done a lot. I mean, I'd done a lot of writing and leading rituals and that sort of thing in that interim period. So it was a kind of recognition, and they were both lovely and wonderful experiences. And 1993, Yule 93, we had the first open air Holda ritual. Now, Alex and Carol came back the day before and went to the snow well with me. And Carol said to me, Holda's here, she's holding a wand. And guess what was on the top of her wand? And she said she wants a coronation tomorrow, because she says the people in this country have forgotten all about her. She wants to remind them, so she wants a coronation. And we gave her a coronation. We had a lot of pagans there. It was a warm, wet day the day before, and I woke up on that morning and it was wonderful. It was bloody freezing. There was this wind blowing that cut you in half almost. It was, this is it, you know, this is the right sort of day. And we took some mead along, and there were chaos magicians and FOI people and druids and people of no fixed pagan haircut and that sort of thing. You know, it was all going on, and we had an absolutely wonderful time. And I felt we'd done our best for her. You know, that was pretty important, really. Now, how did she get here is the next question, isn't it? And a gentleman called the Centurion comes along. Now, the Centurion is a real character. He's a German who was a centurion in the Roman army in the 4th century CE, and he was stationed at the garrison in Greenwich. They were light duties, I think you could say, because keeping the populace down, I mean, wasn't in it really. The populace were quite happy with the Romans, whether they were here or not. I mean, they just all got on fine. They got on really well, actually. And this guy apparently brought the Holda religion. Let's pass the last picture around. That's another psychically received one. I arranged that with Holda herself without telling the guy who did it. I arranged it with the sitter. And I gave it to the psychic artist and I said, can you give me a picture? And that's what turned out. What we got. I love it actually because it's quite hypnotic. This guy came along and he brought the religion, the worship of the goddess Holda with him, you see, from Germany. And there were, as I'm sure you know, a lot of Germans in the Roman army, and Germans tend to make good soldiers, and it was a good life for a military man, somebody who wanted it. I mean, it was run like a modern army. I mean, it was highly organised. It suited him down to the ground. But he brought this religion with him. Now, how do we know this? Well, he wanted to prove to me that he was pucker. He didn't want me thinking this bloke's taking the piss, you know, he's making it up, he's not what he pretends to be. And he knew I was going to sort of ask him to prove. And he appeared to a friend of mine, a complementary therapist and psychic, one of the people called Amelia Summerfield. She used to do a lot of stuff with me at one time. And he turned up on one occasion when she was doing some meditation, and he showed her a drawing, and he said, right, I want you to draw this, as soon as you come back to ground yourself, draw this, make an effort to remember it, and draw it straight away, and then give it to Jack Gale. That's what you've got to do. So she thought, oh. Anyway, I mean, it just looked like a few lines to her. She couldn't figure out what it was. He said, he will know what it is. And boy, did I know what it was. It was stunning. I mean, it still blows me away even today. I mean, it was a complete replica of the ground plan of Sir William Borman's 1662 layout for the south gate of Greenwich Park, with these radial avenues coming away. And there was one avenue that was marked as being of particular importance. And it's an avenue, one of Sir William Borman's avenues from the 1660s, which aligned perfectly the gate onto Blackheath. If you sight along this avenue, it goes straight to the Roman temple site near Maze Hill. Absolutely rifle barrel accuracy, you know, they line up. And quite clearly, you thought this was a bit important, you know. So after that, he he came into my life rather a lot, and some of the lives of the psychics I was working with, he'd sort of turn up in the middle of the evening and walk through the wall with his helmet under his arm. He'd say something like, "Tell Jack he's on the right track, will you?" You know, and he'd go disappear again. And I did a talk in Waterstone's bookshop in Salisbury. They did this Meet the Authors thing, and I was invited to go and do a talk because I'd done the books for Cattle Band. It was like being a rock and roll star. It was great, actually. I turned up at the shop, and there was a whole window with just me in it, and nobody else. My name like that, you know, I couldn't believe it. And these giant book covers blown up to the sort of size. Oh, it was real rock and roll, man. It was great. Anyway, two totally independent people in the audience came up to me afterwards and said, "Are you aware that an 8-foot-high centurion was standing behind you right through your talk?" And I said, "No, but I'm not surprised." And the same thing happened about 2 months ago in Wickermoon. We had a little launch do for the book. And while I was talking, apparently this gigantic Roman soldier was standing behind me. But then he'll shrink down because his actual size, he's shorter than me. He's quite diminutive, but he's got a large persona. He's got a large personality. He's larger than life. And when he speaks, apparently, especially when he was talking to Amelia, to make the point of being a German, he was strutting about like Gert Frober or somebody like that, you know, an old black and white war film, and talking in this exaggerated German accent. "We have ways of making you listen," you know, all this sort of stuff. And it made the point. She said he's a German centurion, you know, and she saw him down near the Motherstone Fountain. He'd taken his uniform off and he was just in a toga and he was relaxing and he was talking to her and this sort of thing. So we wanted to find out more, and we knew they'd got a massive collection of Roman coins in the museum at Plumstead. I phoned them up and they said, "We've lost them." I said, "Lost them? Of course you haven't." They said, "I'm really sorry, we've lost them, you know, we don't know where they are, they've been misfiled." They'd all been dug up at Greenwich in 1902 when they had the excavation. So I thought, well, what we in a big case, and I thought, what are we going to do? So I said, "Let's get the centurion on the job." So we sort of said to him, "Can you find them?" And I got this phone call to say they've turned up. They were misfiled. So we went along, me and Debbie Gallagher, who some people here will know, lovely lady and brilliant psychic. Doesn't talk about it very much, but she's damn good. So we went along to Greenwich Borough Museum, as it then was, and they got all these coins out for us. And I said, the lady who was the curator there was somebody I'd worked with in Alton Library in 1962. It's going back, isn't it? It feels like the Civil War or something like that. So she knew me, and you know, she knew I was doing some weird things and interested in other strange things. She said to her companion, "Oh, he's harmless. He's a bit of a nutter, but he's harmless, you know. He does weird things like listening to coins that were buried, you know, hundreds of years ago and this kind of thing. He's all right. He won't do any harm." So we didn't have a tape recorder with us on this occasion. She was just sitting there tuning in, and I was doing the writing. Now, this guy had told us he was there during the reign of Constantius. He was in Greenwich during the reign of Constantius, the son of Constantine. And at that time, I mean, Constantine, obviously a Christian, so there was this sort of half-hearted Christian overlay on things. But the pagan side of it was far from laying down and being a good boy. I mean, out in Gloucestershire, you've got the Temple to Nodens, haven't you? Litany, the big Temple to Nodens and stuff like that. And so this was absolute pagan, what was going on in Greenwich. And so Debbie, we dowsed to see if we could find some Constantius coins, and we did find some, I'm delighted to say. Dowsing was the only way. I mean, they're like little bits of brown ice cream wafers. You feel as if they're going to disintegrate when you touch them, these coins. You know, it's quite traumatic getting them out and touching them. And they look black. You have to shine a bright light to even see it. You'd never work. It would have taken us hours to find a Constantius one by looking at them. So we dowsed it, and we got them that way to speed it up. And she got this absolute mass of information. Now, Debbie proved to me before we did this, she got a lot of stuff about Blackheath and Kidbrooke. Really weird, obscure stuff about Greenwich having 2 railway stations, which it did in the early 20th century. A lot of people don't know that. She didn't know it. She said it didn't make sense. And aeroplanes taking off from a little airfield at Kidbrooke, which they did. It was a Royal Flying Corps depot. And little planes took off and landed. All this sort of stuff. And then we switched into this mode. And we got a lot of wonderful information here. So this is the reign of Constantius, and this guy was sent over to keep an eye on things at the Greenwich garrison. And the people were quite friendly with him. You know, they were quite friendly with the occupying Roman forces. And there was a decaying goddess cult going on in Greenwich at that time, and he married the Holda cult to this decaying goddess cult. And they all forgot about who was occupied and who wasn't, and him and all the local people got together and they started worshipping this goddess together, and it got really exciting and everybody was in a fantastically good time. And we had quite detailed accounts of the sort of rituals that took place, very often in underground cavities. And they sounded quite Amerindian, you know, there was a lot of wearing of feathers and masks and drums and this sort of thing. And her sacred flowers, like the lily, they were mentioned as well. And a lot of singing and bonfires burning on the banks of the Thames and hundreds of voices raised in song. I mean, it was really inspiring stuff. Now, somebody somewhere didn't like this. Somebody wasn't happy, probably because people were enjoying themselves, I expect. It's usually the way, isn't it? And the local woman was the high priestess, and a Roman civic official, a civilian, became the high priest, and they were sort of masterminding things and leading this cult, if you like. Now, the interesting thing is that they were apparently, according to psychic information received, they were both buried in stone sarcophagi. And in the 1902 minute book of the Greenwich and Lewisham Antiquarian Society, we're going back to smelling of bookbinding for a moment, there's an account of a stone sarcophagus actually being unearthed near the Roman temple site in Greenwich Park. And very mysteriously, it was buried again, which is really weird. The priest that did have his grave was actually robbed, so we were told, so the centurion said, but the priestess's grave is still there. Her priestess's tomb is still there, the sarcophagus is still there, and it's untouched, it's perfectly okay. And Tony Robinson and the gang came along to do a time team excavation in 1999. I made a nuisance of myself to hunt around all the time, you know, asking boring questions. And the centurion, I was aware that he was around and he wasn't terribly happy. I think he was a bit worried, and I think he hoped they wouldn't find this other tomb, you know, they'd miss it. And he got his wish because they did. But the emphasis was on fun until some miserable sod somewhere decided they had to put stop to this, and Centurion himself was murdered by being run through a spear, being run through his belly while two other soldiers held him down. A very good psychic friend of mine, I won't mention his name because he's a bit embarrassed about it. It was the day of the Beltane Bash, and it was when they had the pagan pride procession, and it was almost at the end of it, and there's a lot of people milling around, all happy, banging their drums with green faces and this sort of thing, you know. And all of a sudden, it's like a blinds pulled down, and all the music for him stops, and it goes silent. And there's this scene at the top of Greenwich Park, this poor bugger being held down, and this spear being driven through his belly. And he, subsequently to this, the gentleman concerned, the psychic concerned, used to get a lot of glimpses psychically of this guy standing at the top of Snow Hill surrounded by crows and saying, "Why me? Why me?" But there is quite a positive follow-up to this, which I've tacked on as an appendix in this book. My publisher, one of my two publishers who worked together, was doing proofreading, and the centurion turned up to her and he was talking to her. And he said there's a lot of people sort of waiting to move on who got stuck, who were massacred at that time. And they did a sort of little ritual, and these people moved on, they're okay, and he's okay as well now. So he's a good bloke, the centurion. He's an okay guy. He's a very okay bloke. Now, physical phenomena. Gets a bit risque in a moment, perhaps. In 1995, on a Saturday morning, because that was when I did them, I did a walk around Greenwich Park. And I had two pagan feminists with me. Now, they were not from Cathy Jones Glastonbury women. They weren't part of a sort of big organised scheme like that. They were just people who were pagan and they were feminists. They didn't know each other. It was nice to have them, just the two of them and me, and we did this walk. And there was one called Alison, and she was it just took hold of her, the whole Holda thing in the snow well. She knew nothing about it, she'd never heard of Holda, but it just swept her up, and she loved it. She went home, and that night, alone at home, she dedicated herself to Holda. It's a very, very lovely story, this one, and very weird. Went into work on Monday morning, and nearly had a heart attack. Her desk was like this, it was thrown in the wall, chair was there, the drawer was open, and up, right across the wall, in masking tape, was a gigantic Hagar rune. stuck onto the wall. Now you know why I did that, don't you? It's huge, and she's going around saying to people, she's thinking, oh, please say it was you. You did that, didn't you? Didn't know it was there. We came in. We don't even know what it is. We came in and it was on the wall. We thought you'd done it. We thought you'd popped up to the lure or something, came in early. She said, no, I've just come in. And that's the sort of thing that happens. That is where you get the old magical reality coming in. That sort of thing doesn't happen in consensus reality, does it? But it happens in magical reality. And her friend had an interesting experience. Now, Rose also dedicated herself to Holda. She went back on the Sunday and did it there at the Snow Well site, dedicated herself to Holda. Then two things happened the following week. She had a rather lacklustre lover, and I didn't ask her to give details on that one, but she had this rather lacklustre lover, and apparently she met this absolutely cosmic geezer that week, who replaced the lacklustre lover rather quickly. And in addition to this, she was sacked from a job that she absolutely hated, and 2 days later she was offered a job that she absolutely loved, and she said, I like this Holda stuff, I'm sticking with this. Again, it's very far-reaching. And a fairly personal tale about something that I did. It was in the fairly early years of me working with Holda, which would have been, I suppose, it would have taken place around early 1994. And I used to do quite a lot of solar rituals, light candles and this sort of thing. And I thought it would be rather nice to give Holda a part of myself, something which was very much of my essence as a kind of a pledge. And I thought, well, let's give her some seminal fluid, you see. So the said commodity was deposited onto... Do smile if you want to, by the way. You're very welcome. We have fun here. It's quite spectacular what happened, I'll tell you. A freezer lid, the freezer boxes where you put up that you have ice cream and stuff in, live in the freezer. I had a lid, so it was deposited on an inverted freezer lid. When it was all there, we got the altar and candles burning and everything, and I said, I put it down on the altar. And I stood there and looked at it for a moment, and my lady, this is it. And I still don't know why, but for some reason I looked away. Just a split second, and you all know what I'm going to say, I'm sure. And I looked back, and the fluid had vanished into thin air. It had gone. There was not even a tiny hint of moisture there. It had completely disappeared. And I thought, I like this. I thought, I'm in the right religion here, this is all right, isn't it? This is wonderful. And what an honour. What an honour, apart from anything else. And again, this messing with reality, with consensus, with mundane reality. Mundane reality just really goes out the window, doesn't it? It's not there. Right, where are we now? Now, we're nearly at the end. Is that okay, sir? Sir Nigel? Where is he? I can't see him. He's over there, the other field, isn't he? Is that all right? We're nearly at the end now, so we'll have a song in the second half, yeah?
Yeah, that's possible.
We've got a song for you. There's song sheets to give out in a minute. Well, if you haven't got them, I think most of you probably got them anyway. A.D. Webster's oldest road in Greenwich was this little sunken trackway, as he called it. It always makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Which led away from, it goes past the Snow Well Hollow, and it leads away through the tumuli towards an old reservoir the reservoir's not, itself not old, it was put there in about the middle of the 19th century. But it's a trackway of great antiquity, and so you've got the burial grounds there, you've got the other burial grounds down in front of the Queen's house, where that wonderful clothing attachment with the man with his immense willy was found. And then, if you go down King William Walk, the walkway that comes out of the park's bottom main gate, leading down towards the Catty South, isn't it? And before you get to the main road, before you get to where Romney Road and Nelson Road butt onto each other, on the right you've got a place called Devonport House, which is used for various corporate events, and a very, very large flat area of lawn. And under that, you've got these 20,300 naval pensioners buried. Now, they're buried according to rank, apparently. Must be pretty intimate, because they must be pretty close. 20,000 is a lot, isn't it? It's a lot to be buried in. And when you look at that, it's not that big, that place. And also, 355 people buried nearer the gate, where you've got the statue of King William. It used to be in London. They moved it down there. There was a church that stood there on one occasion, at one time, called St Mary's, and they, bit of ecclesiastical restructuring, it amalgamated with St Alfred's Church as far as parishes were concerned, and it was knocked down, to cut a long story short. Now, the vicar of St Alfred's Church went in there and wrote an account, a horrified account of what he found when he went down into the crypt. What he found was a lot of coffins bursting open and skeletons gaily falling out of them. No one seemed to know who these skeletons actually were. The record keeping had been pretty abysmal, and it was just a deceased person of Greenwich lying down there, you know. And he wrote this report, which I've read, because they got the report in the Greenwich Heritage Centre. It's actually in there. And it was interesting to read it. And so that's another 55 people there, corpses. And so you've got on that side, you've got the death component, but on the opposite side, you've got this whispered existence of a very prestigious and very high quality red light area, which unofficially, and it had to be unofficially, I mean it was Victoria's reign, you know, it was a bit stiff and starchy, unofficially recommended by the Admiralty for the sailor boys to go and have fun, and sexual hygiene standards were apparently very high in these brothels down in King William Walk, and it wasn't terribly likely that you'd go in and you'd come out with more than you'd gone in with. Be very careful saying that, you know. That was the story. Now, when I was younger than I am now in Greenwich, a lot of elderly men have since passed on, and a lot of these elderly men knew this story. There's a guy who was working in the National Maritime Museum as a volunteer, and he told me it as well, and they all agreed that it was there. My grandfather, of course he never went in there, but he did talk about what you were likely to find if you did, and he knew people who'd been in there. And of course it all looked pretty mundane on the ground floor, but what went on upstairs was rather a different matter. I mean, you look at King William Walk, there's a lot of photos of King William Walk on Bank Holiday Monday, taken by a guy called Sturgeon. He was a brother of a Baptist minister. Now, you're not going to get a brother of a Baptist minister taking photos of ladies leaning against the wall saying, "Want some fun, dearie?" Are you? You're not actually going to get that. You're not going to get that at all. So he would have averted his camera's gaze, wouldn't he? You know, not very good for the area, you know, not very good publicity. But it seems to have been going on there. There doesn't seem really any doubt about that, and I think that's very significant, because then you've got sex one side of the road and death the other. And it occurred to me on the morning of New Year's Eve 2004, strolling through Greenwich, that this all lined up. And King William Walk, if you just look at it, going away into the distance, and you don't take any notice of the way the walkway in the park and the roadway bends around and it goes up Snow Hill Walk, or Brazen-Faced Walk as it was originally called. This must surely be why. But it lines up with the Snow Well and with Henry Moore's wonderful knife-edge statue, which suits that place very well, I think. And then, of course, the pathway carries on over to the south through the burial grounds, and the whole thing sort of dovetails together. Now, not much has been written. I mean, it has been acknowledged in print that this red light area was actually there, but I did a talk called Trackway of Carnal Delight, as I say, in the old Spanish galleon for Selks a few years ago, and there was a woman there, an old mate of mine, called Geraldine Charles, who's curator of archives. I mean, you know David, you've met her, haven't you? Geraldine Charles was curator of archives in the National Maritime Museum, and she said they got a painting of a naval pensioner, one of the naval pensioners from the Greenwich Hospital, the old guy with one leg, the inevitable man with one leg and a cheery face and a little pipe, you know. And the museum paintings department said they couldn't understand where it was a bit splurgy on each side of it, and it looked as if something had been painted over. I wondered what. Well, they decided to find out, and they took some x-rays, and lo and behold, the guy's got a prostitute on each hand. That's why when they were painted over, someone put it in, "Oh, we can't have this, oh, we get the place a bad name, you know, paint them out. And that was what they did. Now, that's not quite the end, but what I've agreed with Nigel will do, we've got a little song. I'll just tell you a little bit about this song afterwards, and we'll all have a go at singing it. It's a lovely, lovely song to sing, actually. It's all about Holda and any well. It could be the Snow Well, it could be just any well. But I have given you a picture on your song sheet there is a photograph of the snow well, and I did that for a purpose. Apart from giving you an idea of what it looks like, when you look at a photograph from an occult point of view, when you look at a photograph of somewhere, what you're doing is in fact tuning into the vital essence of that place. So that's why you've got a photograph, okay? And we'll leave it at that, and we'll have a little break, and thanks for listening so intently. Thank you. Down by the well, where the old tree grows, where sorrow is banished, so I've heard folks say, there stands the young woman whose love overflows. Red roses and lilies are blooming today. The hawthorn blooms sweeter, much sweeter than tree, than all the trees growing, so I've heard folks say. And mother as fair as my loved one shall be. Red roses and lilies are blooming today. For 7 nights long on the moor she lay, all bathed by the dew, so I've heard folks say. And now to that moorland I must make my way. Red roses and lilies are blooming today. On the thorn spring's chill waters my love she drinks deep. The well is her bower, so I've heard folks say. By violet and primrose this goddess shall sleep. Red roses and lilies are blooming today. Down under the branches and white hawthorn flower, the waters they beckon, so I've heard folks say. Deep down in the well in my goddess's bower, it's in the keen arms of my jewel I'll lay. Yes, it's in the keen arms of my jewel I'll lay. Ho, Holda!
Hello,